All right, my friends, since we got our IP addresses configured, now we need to configure our IGP. And in this case, we're going to configure OSPF with a process ID of 10. So we're going to jump on, we're going to start from our prod switch, and we're going to work our way all the way up to our core router. And we'll just make sure we get our IGP all nice and configured here. All right, so let's do it. So let's go to our production switch here. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so I can see what I'm doing. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and go to configure T. I can type router OSPF, we're going to do 10. Now this is just how I like to do my IGP configurations. I like to make every interface default passive, and then I like to know the passiveness interface on a specific links that I'm going to have as my neighbors. So in this case, it's going to be on my link going to the production router. And if you don't happen to remember what that was, if you recall, we do have it in the diagram. So you can definitely reference the diagram to tell you what port is what. It's also in the description on the interfaces too. So for this one, we're going to no passive interface, and this one's going to be gig 00. And that's the only one we're going to do no passive interface on. We're not forming any other adjacencies here. Just up northbound to production router. Production router. All right, so now we need to advertise our networks, and we're just going to create one flat area 0 here. So an easy way that I like to do this is show my currently connected IPs that we just configured. So here they are. We're going to go ahead and add the specific IPs here, and I like to do a wildcard mask of exactly that address, and then we'll do an area of a 0, and we'll do this for every single IP that we have here. There's none that we don't want to advertise. All right, so we did that one, a network, and this one's going to be our loopback address. And then we got our last network here, 150, 150, 150.1. Oops, I did not do a 0 there. All right, there we go. So that should be everything we need to do from a EIGRP perspective, or OSPF perspective. We're not running EIGRP. What am I talking about here? All right, just do a quick show runs pipe section router O, and that shows us our configuration here. So that is good to go. We're going to save it. And we can't test this yet because we have no neighbors. So we have nothing configured on production router. So let's go configure it on production router. And we should see the neighborship come up if we did it right. And same concept here. Again, I'm going to go into production router. I'm going to do the same process that I just did. Again, this is going to be OSPF 10, passive interface default. Now this guy's going to have two interfaces that are not passive. It's going to have his gig 00 interface that's going to the core router, and it's going to have his gig 02 interface that's going down to the production switch. All right, now we got to add our networks. And again, I just find this the easiest way to do it, so you don't really have to think about it. All right, there's our links that we have. Again, we have our two link addresses, and then we have our loopback address. And again, everything's going to be in area 0. So we're just going to make this simple, easy, clean cut area 0 for the time being. We can make it multi-area if we wanted to as well in the future. Now, as you can see, it already came online. We got a log message. So let's just finish configuring our network statements here, and then we'll look at that real quick. All right, there we go. Let's look at our configuration. If I could type, that'd be awesome. My hands are a little cold today. So that is our configuration. We do know that it's up and working. Show IP OSPF neighbors. We'll show our neighbors. They're up. And we do a show IP route real quick. We should have a routes. We should have some OSPF routes. We should have the subnets, the server networks, the shared server network, and then the production server network are being advertised through OSPF, and we should have those. We should also see the loopback 0 interface or subnet addressing. So I should see, and there it is. We do have our 10.10.4.4. Now, of course, we're advertising 10.10.3.3, so if we go to the production switch, we should actually see that being advertised to us. Let's just double check. And there it is, 10.10.3.3. Good to go. All right, let's go ahead and configure our OSPF on our core RTR. Now this is going to be a little different. This is going to be iOS XR configuration. Again, you have to make sure you hit those commits. It won't make any changes, it won't save any changes, or apply any changes until you type commit. So this is our core router, and we're going to only enable OSPF on our connection to Production RTR. Now this one's going to be a little different of a configuration standpoint. All right, so a couple things I didn't do. I didn't set my router IDs, and I like to set my router IDs. I like to hard code them, and I'll go back through and hard code them and then clear the process. So I just missed that step on the prod router and this prod switch. But real quick on this guy, I'm going to go ahead and set my router ID. That's my ID, right? That way I know what it is. And we're going to go to our address, our area 0 here. And in here, we're going to go ahead and specify those interfaces that are going to be our adjacency neighbor here. So this case is going to be 000. And then also our loopback address, right? So this is just a little different than what we normally do. All right, so let's go ahead and hit commit here. And let's just validate this takes this change. Sometimes with iOS XR, the changes don't actually take, and we just want to, yeah, it took. Good. So we're good there. Let's go ahead and check our configuration and just double check we didn't miss anything. So there we got our router OSPF 10, router ID 10, or our router ID 10.10.1.1, address family IP4 unicast, area 0, we have interface loopback 0, and then we have interface of our gig 000 interface, right? I didn't see any log messages. Let's just take a look and see if that came up. It looks like it came up. Yep, good stuff. So if we do a show IP route real quick, we should see our routes all through the chain, and we do have our link addresses here for everything. We also do have our server subnets here, which is what we should expect to see. And we have our loopback addresses as well. So this is looking pretty good. And what we could quickly test is from switch here, we could just ping 10.10.1.1, and we could source it from our loopback 0 address. We should be able to ping through. Unless I messed up something, which could be the case. And it looks like I did. I messed something up. Let's just double check that. So on switch 1, we have 10.10.4.4. Let's just see if we have a route in our table. We do not have 10.10.1.1 here. So something's definitely not right. Let's go back to our core router and see if we actually have our loopback address configured. Ah, there we go. It's a different address. That explains it. Wait a second. Ah. So what happens when I make changes to a topology live? So a couple things I'm going to change real quick. I'm actually going to go ahead and remove router OSPF. I'm going to hit commit here to actually remove it. It's going to get rid of router OSPF. I'm going to add it back in, but when I get it back in, I'm actually going to change the router ID to the one I want it to be. Router ID is going to be 10.10.2.2. Address family IP4 unicast. Area 0. We're going to add our 2 interfaces here. Area not O, but 0. We're going to add our loopback 0 interface. And then we're going to add our interface gig 0000. And we're going to hit commit here. So now, assuming that I have things correct this time around, show IP in brief, we should have a 10.10.2.2. And if I go to the production switch, I should see that route. And I actually did see that route. I was just trying to ping the wrong address. So again, I made some changes to this topology recently. Instead of, I made some changes to the IDs of each device. So their IP addresses have shifted. So I could be just going off memory of what it was before. But here, if I try to ping 2.2.2 and I source it from my loopback address, it should work. And it does. Good to go. All right, so we have our IGP configured from our production switch, our prod RTR, and then our core router. Right, so our next step is actually going to be to configure our eBGP neighborship from our core RTR into our iNet. All right, and that way we can actually get our internet routes into the core router, which was just going to be a default route.